Shrink the Nation is a podcast for thoughtful, informed adults, preferably with a pour in hand. The views and opinions expressed on the show are those of the hosts and guests only and do not reflect the views of any employers, institutions, licensing boards, government agencies, bourbon distilleries, or family members, especially our family members. They've asked us to be very clear about that. This show is for informational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing said here should be taken as medical, psychiatric, legal, or professional advice. If you're in crisis, call a professional. If you're mad at something we said, we suggest journaling or emailing us with civility. We're here to challenge ideas, not diagnose strangers. We're clinicians, not your clinicians, and we have the bourbon to prove it. Let's go. All right, we're back. Welcome to Shrink the Nation. Propaganda and conspiracies are like junk food for the anxious brain. Salty, crunchy, and absolutely not a balanced meal. Tonight, we've got a special patient on the couch. He's 249 years old, wears a top hat, and lately he's been doom scrolling at 3 a.m. Uncle Sam says he's seeing patterns everywhere, hearing enemy footsteps in every headline, and trusting basically no one. We're not diagnosing a person with paranoia. We're exploring a national mood that gets more paranoid when life feels chaotic and out of our control. Why does the simple enemy feel so comforting? Why do conspiracy theories organize fear but steal our agency? And how do we help Uncle Sam step away from the rabbit hole and back into reality-based power? Pour something, take a breath. This is group therapy for a country that keeps picking fights with the shadows on its own wall. Before we get started, I'm David, board-certified psychiatrist and a couple of things, 20 plus in the military. Tonight, I am enjoying my go-to, which is a lovely wheated bourbon, Larceny. The mash bill on that, I know you were wondering, Robbie, the mash bill on my wheated bourbon. 68% corn, 20% wheat, 12% malted barley. The interesting thing about Larceny, that in the early 1900s, you had U.S. Treasury agent John E. Fitzgerald. He had the keys to Kentucky's bonded warehouses, and after hours, he'd slip inside and he'd taste from the best barrels and leave them a little, we'll say lighter, if you will. Those extra smooth casks, they got the nickname Fitzgerald barrels. And so if we go forward a century or so, bourbon that's been inspired by his extracurricular activities, that crime on the label is now Larceny, and that's why I'm enjoying one of his favorites was the wheated bourbon. So I like the wheated bourbons. Unlike most of the bourbons that I've had over all of our episodes, this one is always delightful to start to finish.
Yeah.
I love the first sip all the way straight through. In fact, I'm going to struggle pacing myself. I'm going to be slurring at the end of this episode. Guaranteed.
Pace yourself, brother. Yeah, wheated bourbons do have a much smoother experience. There's no doubt. Hey, I'm Rob, 30 years in the military and 25 in psychiatry. I am doing also a wheated bourbon, which is Maker's Mark. Their catchphrase is, "We taste expensive because we are." And it's not an expensive bourbon, but wheated bourbons have a smoother experience, no doubt. Why I have a preference for the more rye, I don't know. I like the spicy.
Because nothing is easy for you. Nothing can be easy for you. You have to make everything more difficult.
There's an element of suffering that is required for me to feel
You were good in the Air
about
Force.
anything.
You just had to switch over to the Army.
I did. Not enough tents and guns in my life, so I had to come over.
You had to make it more difficult. Then you met me, thought, life could be worse.
How can I make my life harder? You know, this guy, David.
Let's do a podcast.
It is always humorous to me when I think about your credentials and they're real. And under other circumstances, I would question them, except for the fact that I was there for the achievement and actually signed off on those things. Anyway, today we're talking about something that actually I am quite interested in. And that is just the paranoid style in American politics.
Paranoia, or paranoid, the word, it's pretty loaded. People might get the wrong idea if we don't clarify what we're talking about. So I want to separate what we're going after. Clinical paranoia, it's a delusional belief of personal persecution, which we see with psychotic disorders, symptoms. The FBI is planted a chip in me. That's not what we're going to be talking about. Conspiracist ideation, on the other hand, a more national level of paranoia, is more common, subclinical, general tendency to suspect powerful hitting groups or orchestrating events. That's what we are really going to be talking about tonight. Correct me if I'm wrong.
We are, and you're right. I like how I have to confirm that you're right.
I just want to give you the opportunity to add anything. But honestly, when I listen to these in editing and you say I'm right, I pat myself on the back. I delete all that.
Right. To our tens of listeners, David is right. So,
That's all I need to hear.
yeah, mark it in your notebook.
That'll be my new ringtone.
From a clinical standpoint, what David and I, as psychiatrists, will often see is very individualized paranoia, which usually takes the picture of the world is specifically against me. And there's often bodies like the CIA, FBI, or government, which I said very specifically as government, because that's how it often comes. What we're looking at today is not individualized. It is a little broader. So the individuals who end up buying into or end up investing into these things, it's a little more global, more ubiquitous, this sense that there is an external force manipulating and controlling, and has been certainly a part of American politics. And honestly, if you look around the world politics forever, that chaos demands a sense of order. When things are so chaotic and so beyond our understanding, one way in which we can assuage our anxieties, make sense of it, is paranoia, and this idea that there is an external force, some perfect enemy that is not only everywhere, they are perfectly intelligent, they are perfectly silent, they have this infinite amount of time and this infinite amount of resources to manipulate everything to make it end in a way that explains the chaos.
It's a natural way to relieve anxiety when you feel a lack of control. There are other common defense mechanisms that kind of go along with conspiracist thinking. Projection, which we have spoken about a lot, attributing one's own unacceptable feelings onto others. Splitting, essentially a simplistic moral splitting of pure us versus evil them, dividing the world into an all good versus all evil camps. So splitting is a defense mechanism that comes along often.
It absolutely does. It's uniquely relevant to American politics. I have to admit, I don't know the governmental systems of enough outside the United States government. We've always had this two-party system. And this two-party system seems really fit psychologically with splitting, that there is us and them. When something is uncomfortable, something doesn't necessarily fit, it makes us angry, it creates negative emotions. It is so much easier to split, to push it off on the other. They're the in-group versus the out-group. To push it off on the out-group, it does seem in our two-party system that it is ready-made to make sense of that. The world is way too complicated and nuanced to really sit with it on any given day. It's much easier to say, I am blue, I am red, I am Democrat, I am Republican, whatever your political views are, and then blame the problems on the other.
And that goes along perfectly with another defensive mechanism, which is externalization of blame.
Yeah.
You have the splitting, and then you have that externalization of something, which is taking those thoughts, personal or societal failures, and then blaming it on the other to avoid any uncomfortable self-examination. Is it possible that it was me or us, or that I had any role in it whatsoever? Another big defense mechanism that you'll see.
Absolutely.
There's magical thinking, seeing false patterns that play a role, connecting dots, seeing apparent plots, perceiving illusory patterns, random data to just sort of satisfy some sort of need for meaning.
We've talked to this in the past, is the sunk cost fallacy. That once you buy into these things, you're investing in them. And in order to maintain the anxiety control that they provide, once you're invested, you are invested. And stepping away from them is challenging. So you do end up finding the through line, the connectors. And no matter how weak those connectors are, they still become data points in the bigger picture. And that's a problem.
It helps you to maintain that belief that there is somebody in control, even if it's not you.
Yeah.
Because chaos and the randomness of life and reality is much more difficult a pill to swallow
Yeah.
than that there's an evil force that is in control of everything, because at least you can blame all of these bad things that are happening. Hurricane Katrina didn't happen because Hurricane Katrina was tragedy. It happened because the powers that be caused it to happen.
Yeah, and it's fascinating to me that there is a conspiracy side train about control of the weather, and whether it is chemtrails or whatever, that there's a sense among some people that the weather actually is controlled, that there are things that are happening, people who are choosing to initiate weather, which I don't think there's any science that supports that, nor is there any benefit to it. This falls back to psychologically our friend Johnny Kohut.
It's Walter.
Yeah, we termed his name as
Johnny
Walter,
Walter.
but Heinz Kohut, who I probably will end up referencing so often because I think it's relevant. But yeah, for the in group, for our tens of listeners who are now our in group, when I reference Johnny Kohut, you know what we're talking about. Johnny said one of the other things that is among the three big things that he felt was necessary for a healthy adult personality was an experience called an idealized parental object. And what he meant was when you're tiny, you have a sense of the chaos of the world, and you also have a sense of your inability to control the chaos, to make sense of the chaos. You just don't understand. And you realize the world's bigger than I am, and I can't do this alone. When you're tiny, it results in an anxiety that is overwhelming. So the way we deal with it is we need to find an idealized sense of a perfect parental object, a parent that can control that for us, that can make sense of it for us, and that can protect us from it. You can look back on your childhood and you can think of your parents and you can think of how you saw your parents, and then you grow up and you realize they were as messed up as every adult in the world is. But you saw them in a special way. You saw them as being particularly intelligent, powerful, competent, because you had to. You had no choice. My sense is, and I cannot find any research to support this, but my sense is that those who end up falling down the rabbit hole of paranoia lack that idealized parental object.
Magical thinking is normal in early childhood.
Absolutely.
And we do know that as we get stressed, we will tend to fall back on behavioral patterns that we had in development, depending on the level of stress. If something was working for you and you were particularly stressed out, that kind of magical thinking can definitely come back. The magical thinking that you would see in conspiracy thinking is not really unlike the magical thinking that you would see with people who have superstitious thinking. An example would be people who have superstitions with sports. I won't name any names, but I know of a gentleman who, for the entire 2007 New England Patriots season, did not get a haircut. And for that entire New England Patriots season, they won every single game.
Yeah.
And then before the Super Bowl, the day before the Super Bowl, got a haircut. As painful as it is for that person to admit it, they lost that game.
They did.
And that was devastating for that young man. Name whoever that was. And there was some magical...
I don't know who this jackass is, but I think it was you.
There was some stress there many, many years ago. And there's definitely some magical thinking to that.
Right.
Did that have anything to do with it? No, of course not.
To the audience, the tens of listeners, magical thinking is a childhood coping mechanism that we all kind of fall into. And you say magical thinking, there's almost a pejorative quality to it. But the fact is that we do this, and we do it throughout our lives, in which we have this belief in order to control the chaos that is life, that we believe we have more control than we have. So worst case scenario is a child who's being abused, and they tell themselves, if I am a good boy or girl, if I'm good, I won't be abused, and ends up exerting an internal sense of control for something that is outside of their control. So, an example of some idiot thinking that not having a haircut resulted in the winning team is very similar to a story for my
And
life,
18
in
in one
which,
season.
yeah, this was not me.
Well,
Clearly,
some of us
David.
have hair, so obviously
True. Hit me where it hurts the most, David. Go ahead. Yeah, I'm a bald man, but I have a family member who spent an entire season in the bathroom, and the reason they did that, every football game, they would lock themselves into the bathroom, and somehow they felt like that ensured victory. And if I ran the stats on that, it didn't. And if I thought about it scientifically, it didn't.
but there's the magical thinking. It is a normal part of development, and it is something that can come back when stressed out.
Absolutely.
There is research to kind of show the types of personalities or the types of things that do make somebody more vulnerable to conspiratorial thinking. That does exist. Johnny Cohet had his place, having strong relationship role models as you are raised, good boundaries, good caring caregivers to help you navigate life's challenges is a necessary component of developing healthy coping mechanisms. Definitely an important thing. Here are the highlights of what can make somebody more vulnerable. A feeling of powerlessness or low personal control particularly stands out. People who sense that they have little control over their lives are more drawn to conspiracy theories. Feelings of uncertainty or social normlessness can drive people towards groups or narratives that promise clarity, which can be explained by the uncertainty identity theory. In times of acute uncertainty, individuals often identify strongly with groups, including extremists or conspiracist groups that offer firm, clear ideologies. Loneliness and social exclusion can increase in vulnerability as well. Conspiracy communities provide belongingness and in-group identity for those who feel alienated. We spoke about that in previous episodes. That sense of belongingness is a real big draw for people. Low trust in institutions predisposes people to suspect that the official story is not real. Surveys have shown that people who deeply distrust the government or the media are far likelier to endorse conspiracies. That's been around for a long time. Collective narcissism and exaggerated in-group pride and out-group paranoia correlates with conspiratorial beliefs. So if your faction is convinced that outsiders are constantly plotting against their great group, that's something we're seeing a lot more of now. That's why we're having this conversation. It's something that the political culture environment that we're seeing is creating a lot more of. And then schizotypy is also really highly correlated.
Define schizotypy for the tens of listeners.
A tendency towards odd beliefs or magical thinking. That's going to be somebody who's already has a personality heavily based in odd magical thinking.
Eccentricity.
Those are the big factors that will make somebody particularly vulnerable. We have touched on all of them at some point in past episodes.
Yeah, to the audience, we do have a through line, and as it turns out, there's some sense to everything that we've talked about. The bourbon kind of gets in the way, though, sometimes.
The most interesting thing to me is that this rise, because in 2022, I believe, the data was something that about 50% of Americans believed some conspiracy theory. I don't know what the numbers are today. What is interesting is that one of the major contributing factors in your vulnerability to believing conspiracy theories is belonging to a group that holds such a strong conviction in that faction of in-group versus out-group. And our political environment is absolutely breeding that today.
Yeah, no doubt.
It's terrifying. Our political environment is turning our country into a boiling cauldron of conspiracy.
For political purposes, our country, Uncle Sam has chosen to lean into conspiracies or at least allude to them. So as it stands, there's only a few outlier major politicians that believe or that verbally tout conspiracy theory, but they lean into them. For the short-term gain of votes, they are costing us a long-term problem with trust in, say, the media, institutions. Those chickens do come home to roost eventually, no doubt. I want to pull us way, way, way back to infancy of our nation and talk about the Salem witch trials.
Your infancy or the nation's infancy?
I was a small child.
You were like, what, a teenager?
Yeah, I was in short pants at that moment in time. And in the puritanical environment that I lived in, the fact that I was wearing short pants was really frowned upon. I was a rebel. People just didn't understand.
We're going back to the 1690s.
I'm going to be me. But anyway, the Puritans, way back when in Massachusetts, they had established a colony, and that colony was based on puritanical thought, commitment to God and the way that they defined it. And at the point that the Salem witch trials came along, they felt there was a fear that they were losing their point of their existence. There was competing colonies that were actually being more successful, and they were failing. The way they ended up managing it.
Just to frame it, they had suffered a brutal war with indigenous tribes. They had a smallpox epidemic and social factionalism in the church.
Mm-hmm.
The bourbon is definitely hitting me at this point. So I just want to be clear, because at no point in my life have I ever had the empathy for the people of the Salem witch trials that I have in this moment.
Right.
I'm reading my notes on the Salem witch trials, and it is hitting me
Right.
so much more. Yeah, I'm really trying to figure out why they don't let teenagers in high school drink in social studies, because this would have been so much more salient with larceny. Larceny, making the Salem witch trials real.
Well, I think that might be their new selling point. Their new tagline is larceny.
Larceny. Make high school fun again.
Make high school fun again. Yeah, that's beautiful. That's a beautiful tagline. Yeah, honestly, in my research, I have always wrote that off as crazy. It's just crazy. It was crazy people, the old-timey people. And the reality is, it's so easy to look backwards in time and see them as being ignorant or not quite as smart as we are. And there's a difference between not knowing and being dumb. But it's easy to look back and thinking, oh, they were dumb. They were just dumb. They did these things.
There were clear stressors in 1692 that were creating problems for Salem.
There were
social outcasts who were being accused. So there were clear scapegoats. An outspoken woman, a Caribbean slave, a beggar, people with prior reputations, classic scapegoats they could lay their problems onto to say, these people are being influenced by the devil. There was projection. The influential Putnam family was using the trials to settle scores. They were using printed broadside sermons to fan the panic. It was face-to-face. It was gossip. It was church teachings. There was hysteria created to resolve the anxieties of all of the difficulties that were happening, but it was being placed upon the shoulders of 19 hanged, 1 pressed to death, over 200 people were accused.
Yeah.
Wow.
And the relevance to us at this moment in time is that it is a microcosm of the American experiment, certainly the infancy of the American experiment. But these individuals had a sense that their experiment in puritanical life was failing. And there's a lot of reasons it was failing. When something starts to fail, you've got a couple of choices. Choice number one is, hey, we're not doing it quite right. We need to do this better. Let's think about how we're approaching this. That is a much more nuanced and complicated way of thinking about it. The other option, and the option they went down the road of,
blame a bunch of people and press people to death.
Yeah, let's kill some.
Option two,
let's kill some chicks. No, what they really ended up leaning into was that we're not being puritanical enough, that we've lost the favor of God. And this is how we regain that, is that we double down. Now, the problem is, in their case specifically, is they killed people who were innocent people who, this is a spoiler, so to the audience, you turn it off right now if you don't want to know.
Again, with
they weren't witches.
Not telling people to turn off the podcast would be excellent, Robbie. We got to stop doing that.
Right.
Just earmuffs for like just
earmuff it. Earmuff it, folks. They weren't witches because, hey, surprise, witches don't exist. They weren't witches.
I would assume that the witches would have done something to not be smushed to death.
And that's the interesting thing. If you give omnipotence to a population and say it's their fault, the fact that these individuals could not protect themselves kind of conflicts with the omnipotence that they were given.
One of the more fascinating things is it's a reminder. I have this note that I've written in a moment of
Clarity.
and I actually do have this
You actually wrote it on paper. Everybody, he's actually using paper.
on paper. But if you go back to 1692, you have this case of mob mentality, mass hysteria, and scapegoating. When we had a mid on a few weeks ago, and he was speaking about, I think it was the 2011 NHL Finals, and it was the mob
Yes.
mentality.
I'm here for the riot.
I wrote, can you read that? Nothing is new with humans. It just hasn't been studied, labeled, or understood.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We are not changed.
Mm-mm.
Our environment has, our culture has, our language has, our technology has, but we haven't.
No.
We were accusing people of being witches in 1692. A month ago, somebody had made a comment on Facebook. It made some random ass comment on Facebook. And so our reply was, well, it sounds like you're living in denial. And the woman's response was, I'm calling you a pedophile.
Oh my gosh, we got to pedophile.
Yeah, immediately. It was quite the escalation.
That has to be some kind of mark of success, actually, for us.
Yeah.
We made it into the delusion.
From 1692 to 2025, we have not evolved
No.
at all as humans.
We're not designed to evolve that quickly. And we do tend to feel like, because we know things or we have access to things, we have access to Google.
We have access to everything.
Yeah.
We have access to all of the information that has ever existed that we can. We have all of the knowledge, and yet we are doing the same exact shit that we were doing in 1692.
And I think that's a future episode. The algorithm made me do it. Going back to these individuals, they were a failing colony. And there were reasons they were failing. It really had nothing to do with necessarily their puritanical beliefs. It was that they were making some bad decisions across the board. They had a choice. And the choice was, hey, let's do it better. Or, hey, let's blame some women and kill them. And they went the route of, hey, let's blame some women and kill them. The problem with conspiracies is they gave their agency away. They gave their decision-making away and focused in on a singular problem, a singular solution that had a low probabilities. If we're talking courses of action in the Army, when we do the military decision-making, MDMP, we develop courses of action.
You used an acronym.
MDMP, military decision-making process. So you take your information, you assess your information, you develop courses of action, then use a criteria to rate those courses of actions, and then you choose which course of action best fits the situation. They didn't do a very good MDMP. They didn't do a decision-making process. They selected a course of action that ended up assuaging their anxiety. It made them feel better. They felt like they were getting closer to their puritanical beliefs, but they also ended up hastening their own failure because they didn't put their energies into the place that was necessary to actually make the changes necessary for them to be successful. So they failed. That's the one interesting and important point that I want to make clear as we end up talking about the present. Conspiracy theories, that those who buy into them, assuages their anxiety, but it doesn't end up resulting in change that is necessary for success. It is giving away your agency to magical thinking, and failure is the next step once you've given into these conspiracy theories.
But then they figured out the menthol cigarette thing and they were good.
They ended up, parlaying that into decades of lung cancer. Yeah, good for them.
There we go.
Yeah.
Good for them. All right.
Hundreds of years.
Hey, it's Rob from Shrink the Nation. As my friend David so eloquently states at the beginning of the show, we are clinicians, but we're not your clinician. We love to joke around and dive into the tough topics, but there's something really important we need to say. If you're struggling with your mental health or facing substance use issues, we want you to know you're not alone. We have dedicated our professional careers to mental health, and we care deeply about it. It's okay to ask for help. Reaching out to a professional in your area could be the first step toward feeling better. Don't wait. There's support out there, and it works. Please take that first step. We want you to be well. Now let's get back to the show. Oh, and don't tell David I said he was eloquent. He'll be insufferable.
What you can look at in cultures historically, and I am not a historian.
What?
Haitians taught us this.
The moops.
The moops and the Haitians taught us that I'm not a historian.
Can I just take this moment to say that I think one of our best episodes is one of our least listened to episodes.
Oh, it's a shame.
It's the moops.
I thought the moops was a good episode.
It was a great episode, and I don't know that people listened to it because I'm not sure they knew what the hell the moops was. But this is a plug. If you haven't listened to the moops, listen to the moops.
Listen to the moops. So historically, you go back in time and you look at cultures and you look when they gave in to conspiracy theory. It is at times of uncertainty, cultural uncertainty, chaos, and a sense that the empire is falling. They're looking for excuses. So if we go back to the 1950s, we had just come out of World War II and we were feeling really good about ourselves. Uncle Sam was on a high, no doubt. He felt pretty confident. Everything was good.
Uncle Sam's El Camino was looking slick.
Exactly. He had waxed it. I mean, old school wax.
It was
Yeah.
looking good. That bush light was cold. It was dripping with sweat. He
Absolutely.
was hot stuff.
Yeah, he was cruising the streets, picking up chicks, really confident. And then all of a sudden, we got hit in the 50s with some challenges. And those challenges were the Soviet Union largely, but the sense was that from the external world, observing the Soviet Union, they were more advanced than we were, and they were making progress where we were not making progress. That's the problem with being on the top, is that there's no place to fall but down. And we were definitely on top right after World War II. And all of a sudden, we started to fear that we were failing, we were falling, we were going to be toppled. And McCarthy came along. He was a senator who became very focused as a period of time that's often referenced as the Red Scare, but he became incredibly focused for his own political needs, desires, that there were these communist infiltrators in our culture and our society. And he had lots of hearings in Washington and accused a lot of people and had a lot of people blackballed from different industries. And for whatever reason, he ended up particularly attacking the entertainment industry, entertainment and news. In that, he played into conspiracy theory that the communists
have you no sense of decency, sir?
He played into this sense that if we were failing, it wasn't our fault. It wasn't us. It was because there was this omnipotent external force that was causing this, and blamed it on communism. And because of people's anxieties at that moment in time, and it is anxiety provoking. When you're on top and there is no place to go but down, you can feel the arc, the confidence start to wane. That's normal. As you get farther and farther away from an accomplishment, you're going to feel less confident about it. He ended up focusing in on communism, and there were lots of folks in the entertainment industry, singers. If you had any history of being involved in anything that was related to communism, or at least how they perceived communism, you got blackballed. It was a dark time, and we were sort of saved by it by Edward Murrow, who is the most popular newscaster lead, and I think he worked for CBS. Do you know?
Like you, I wasn't alive in the 1950s.
Yeah. He pushed against this, and he took a great risk, and he utilized reason and data to push against it. And it ended up ending. It did. It came to an end. Obviously, we're not running around. Well, actually, we are screaming about communism. CBS. We are screaming about communism again. Socialism actually is more the terminology we use now, but it was a dark time, and it was an example of conspiracy theory and the need to make sense of the chaos of the world. And the way we did it was to scapegoat and this magical thinking that these omnipotent communists were infiltrating the United States, and that's why we weren't being successful.
During the Cold War in the 1950s, to lay out some fairness, there was real Soviet espionage occurring at that time. The Rosenbergs, Agrahis. So there was some plausibility to it. However, McCarthy was exploiting those fears exponentially. with little to no evidence when he would accuse people. The accusations went far beyond any evidence and was using it as a personal publicity tool for himself. So there was some threat from the Soviet Union, but not anywhere near the level, the extent, and for the period of time that he was using it, and to the amount of lives. It's hard to fathom, actually, even in thinking back, how much damage was created. That's one of the things that, as we're talking about these events that happen, is that it's really easy to look at them and to read about them, but take into account that everybody is the protagonist of their own life. And you think about the magnitude of the damage, the number of people that are involved. You go back to 1692, you go back to Salem witch trials. 200 people were accused, 20 people were killed, murdered. Let's be real. They were murdered.
State-sanctioned murder.
Yeah. We skip forward to the 1950s, the Red Scare, and this is 4 years of state-sanctioned paranoia, accusations, conspiracies. If you are targeted, you have no recourse. And your life, the life that you have built, imagine as you're driving in your car, sipping your latte, whatever you're doing right now, that everything you know is now, it's done. You've been blackballed from everything you know because somebody has decided to accuse you of something that you have no part in. And that honestly, even if you did, it doesn't matter. They're creating a false narrative. It's not real. The lives that were destroyed, and not just your life, it's your spouse, it's your kids, it's their futures, it's so many lives. Sense of decency, sir, what a nice way to say fuck off.
Absolutely. You bring the institutional experience back to the human experience. And in the human experience, these things had impact on humans. As it turns out, each one of us only has a single life. So, what's the old, one death? Yeah. We only get one go at this.
I have been spending my entire life playing video games with reset buttons. Are you telling me that I don't get a redo?
You don't. You don't get a redo in the real world. I know it.
Fuck.
You're so messed up. Yeah, you don't get a redo.
Where's the save point? There's no save point.
There are no save points. There are no redos. We only get a single life. So when we look,
are you saying that YOLO should be cautionary tale?
YOLO is usually associated with pajama, fleece pants, and slippers. So to hell with that. No, because that's usually an excuse to do bad decisions. But
maybe you should take that back and be like,
well,
bro, YOLO. Don't
YOLO,
do that.
Man. I think the point that I'm desperately trying to make is that it is easy to look into history and to think in terms of the bigger picture. And we can say, oh, those Puritans, that McCarthy, what a silly person. But truthfully, it impacted individual lives. And they only got one. The woman that was crushed to death only had that one life, and it ended because she was crushed to death. The individuals whose careers were utterly ruined, they were blackballed for life because they had attended a socialist meeting when they were in college or something like that.
Yeah.
They only got one life.
Or were accused of attending a socialist meeting.
Indeed.
But when you think about the principle of compounding interest, you have a colony of however many thousand people, you have 20 of them that you kill. That 1,000 people turn into millions now. So the 20 people were potentially millions of people today that don't exist because of these mistakes that were made then.
Also, the interesting thing, if we were to talk to someone who's really engaged in conspiracy theory right now and talk to them about, say, the Salem witch trials, I think they would have
Where is Allison? We need her back.
I think they would have a very similar perspective as us. It's like, oh, how silly. Those Puritans.
But the flat earth.
Exactly. The earth's round, folks. But
whoa. How do you know?
Yeah.
That's what they want you to believe.
Totally.
Who are you working for?
Yeah, it's
the
totally
Rothschilds.
Round. It reminds me, there's probably an old joke, and I imagine our tens of listeners have probably heard it. A conspiracy theorist goes to heaven and meets God, and God says, hey, welcome to heaven. What we do is that your first time here is that you get to ask me any question you want, and I'm going to give you the actual answer. And this individual asks about the conspiracy theory that he believed in, and God was like, that's just not true. Just not. I know that people believe it, but it's just not true. And the guy pauses and goes, man, this goes much higher than I thought it did.
My favorite conspiracy theorist is Mike Myers' dad, and So I Married an Axe Murderer.
He'd Hans, he'd be crying himself to sleep on his huge pillow.
It puts an addictive chemical in his chicken that makes you crave it fortnightly.
Yes, and those exist. But let's pull it to the present. Let's pull this conspiracy thing to the present. What's the most ridiculous conspiracy theory that you have heard that actually gained some purchase?
Okay, so in the mid 2000s, there was a Brazilian blog or hoax that gained some steam and then actually went viral a few years later that Avril Lavigne had died and was replaced by a lookalike named Melissa. There was evidence that this occurred by tiny changes in her appearance, her voice, handwriting, lyrics, and then paparazzi poses, which are pretty easily explained by the fact that she got older, styling changes, lighting, normal artistic evolution. Turns out that when she wrote a song in 2000, maybe as a 16-year-old, it wasn't quite the same as when she would write a song as a 30-year-old. But this one struck out to me because she was very popular right as I got out of boot camp. And my kids to this day are convinced that she and I dated in the early 2000s.
He didn't date Avril Lavigne.
No, definitely did. Yeah, no, we were.
He didn't. Just remember that.
Well, maybe it was Melissa. I don't know, but
he dated Melissa. It was not Avril Lavigne.
But classic, she denied it in interviews.
I'm not dead, and my name's not
that
Melissa.
She didn't die, but obviously Melissa isn't gonna like tell everyone that she was a body double.
Yeah, well,
but that's one of the more
that's pretty ridiculous, and mine's a little more. My sense of what is ridiculous has been altered by my life experiences. But so during COVID, when the vaccine came out, and there was a conspiracy that the vaccine actually was injecting you with some nanites that would allow the government to track you. I found that utterly insane, ridiculous, because my Army experience tells me that friendly fire is a real problem for us. We end up killing a lot of our own soldiers because we cannot keep track of where soldiers are on a battle space. And I know how difficult it is. I've commanded units, and when I have 2,000 soldiers, I know how challenging it is to know where they are.
But think how convenient it would be to have nanites in everyone.
If we had the ability to nanite soldiers so that we just knew where they were at any given moment, we'd do it. I promise you we'd do it. Not for evil intent, but because it's important for an army who is in a battle space that is fluid and moving. We'd do it, but we don't, and we can't. And because we can't, our soldiers kill our own soldiers at a frightening level. Friendly fire is a problem.
Spoken like a true member of the cabal. A quarter century of government bureaucracy has taught me that if I was going to ask the government to plot out some secret anything, that it would be a miserable failure.
Just keep a secret. If the government could keep a secret, if people could keep a secret, it'd be the things.
One more for the road. We got to pour ourselves a roadie. I remember this very clearly. I was 17 years old. I woke up, my TV was on in my bedroom. I was in high school. I was a senior, and the news was on, which, promise you, I did not have the news going because I was in high school in Phoenix, Arizona, and the Twin Towers were smoking. Within weeks of that happening, I had enlisted in the Navy. I graduated early from high school. My dad had to sign for me to enlist.
Mm-hmm.
By February of 2002, I was on my way to boot camp. Changed my life.
Mine too.
I will say the military, all of the trials and tribulations, difficulties, all of my experiences, I would not be where I am today without that.
Mm-hmm.
I owe everything to that. But Let's talk. 9/11.
Yeah. Well, I have a similar story, and I suppose all of us who are of a certain age has a story about 9/11. But I was in residency at that time, and I was doing a consult psychiatry, and I had no consults for that morning. So instead, I took a dog that had been thrown into my backyard to the groomer, and my buddy who was on the rotation with me called me and said, "Hey, we don't have any consults, do we?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Have you been watching the news?" I had not. And this is pre cell phones and pre ubiquitous media.
I had a cell phone.
Well, I had a cell phone, but it wasn't a smartphone.
It wasn't a smartphone, yeah.
Yeah. And so he calls me on my cell phone, believe it or not. I did have one. It was a flip phone. I'm sure it was a Razor or something, little Motorola job. So he calls me and said, "Are you watching the news?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Hey, a plane flew into the Twin Towers." And I'm like, "God, that's weird. That's awful. Okay, I'll see you later." We had didactics later in the afternoon. And then I went home and flipped on the TV. In my mind, I was thinking like a single engine plane. I certainly wasn't thinking what it actually was. And I tuned in just in time to watch the tower fall. And I remember the impact it had on me. And it's something that I ended up thinking quite a lot about and talking quite a lot about. There was a sense that we were untouchable prior to 9/11. And then when 9/11 happened, all of a sudden, vulnerability became in my consciousness. We are vulnerable to attack. We are not perfectly defended. It had a dramatic impact on me emotionally, sent me to war and sent me down a path in which I had no idea I was going to take. It definitely was an impactful thing. It absolutely changed the arc of my life. But at that moment in time, that sense of vulnerability was responded to by, and I find it fascinating, but there was a conspiracy that we weren't attacked from the outside. We were attacked from the inside, that this was an inside job. The narrative was that the United States government orchestrated this in order to increase the surveillance on its citizens. And that was the prevailing conspiracy theory that was associated with it. So it was a defense against the sense of, gosh, this world is dangerous and is unpredictable. Instead, we've doubled down on the fact that we are so powerful. We are such a powerful nation that we did this to ourselves in order to monitor our own citizens. And certainly there was, in response to this, there was a lot of increased surveillance, particularly cell phone, text message, et cetera, surveillance. But that is one of the roles of paranoia, is to reestablish the sense of the norm that we are that powerful. We are really unable to be touched except by ourselves. Yeah, that wasn't a masturbation joke, David. Marked by how funny you find this, I see where your brain's at. He's a 13-year-old boy, folks.
I am, yeah.
To our tens of listeners, David functions on about a 13-year-old level. But it was followed. And honestly, it actually still resonates that conspiracy, particularly in the 2015, 16, 17 zone, it came back and it was part of a national conversation. The crazy thing is, and we can go back to even JFK, which probably is the initiation of the modern conspiracy theory, the more time you get away from an event, the more space there is to come up with more complex conspiracies to that thing.
Yeah, and Alex Jones was one of the earlier conspiracy theorists who jumped on the 9/11 bandwagon, and then you have a lot of people who were 9/11 conspiracy theorists who jumped over QAnon.
They did.
It's interesting, or maybe not, but certainly you see the mechanism of thought process that goes into undertaking one conspiracy theory makes it easier to jump to another.
Primes the pump.
One of the opening lines of the movie we'd referenced before, Beyond the Curve, was I'd say the protagonist of the movie, but the first one of the people that they're following. What's his name? I don't remember his name. I apologize. He's a famous flat earther. But the thing he says to start is, I was looking for a new conspiracy theory to follow. And that's how he describes finding the flat earth movement, is that he was trying to find a conspiracy to follow. He found his calling with that. Now, I don't know that everybody falls into that category. There are different subsets. To generalize anything, one of my colleagues at the residency would say, never speak in absolutes, which I think is hilarious.
Absolutely
So,
never speak in absolutes. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There are certainly people who look for conspiracies.
There
And
are.
people who were following the 9/11 conspiracy were certainly more than happy to go QAnon or anything else.
Well, yes, those who are prone to conspiracies are going to look for conspiracies. I think one of the things that's fascinating about right now, and bringing it to Uncle Sam as a 249-year-old individual, but right now, there's a couple of mechanisms that make conspiracies more ubiquitous. And it's social media, which is a long running theme for us, that social media, for whatever good it has provided, it has lots of ills. And social media right now has that ability to perpetuate and broadcast these conspiracies. So currently, there is a new crop of conspiracy theories. And if we trace this back historically, the arc that seems to be consistent is periods of uncertainty, change in the economic status, change in job opportunities. And then there's also this prevailing sense of an empire in decline. And in periods where there is that kind of uncertainty, particularly the failure of an empire, coupled with all this social uncertainty, and we also have the tools at this moment which help conspiracy theories to flourish. What is more interesting to me at this moment is not the hardcore conspiracy theorists that have always existed. There's always been the JFK conspiracies or whatever. They were relegated to libraries. They had to go to books. And now there is an element of conspiracy in every engagement people have with social media. And that frightens me a little bit. There's a lot of misinformation, a lot of conspiracy that even the layperson who's not even prone to conspiracy belief has incorporated into their sense of the present.
What that says is that there's a lot of anxiety. What social media does, or really what the internet does, is it gives us access to more information than we've ever had in our existence. And it gets back to what I was saying earlier. Humans haven't changed in 400 years, and 1,000 years, and 10,000 years. We really haven't changed a whole lot. Our evolution has been very little compared to, in the last 400 years, our environment. And so our access to information, even in the last 20 years, has gone from local news, what has happened in my neighborhood, to global happenings within the second. And that creates chaos, anxiety, when your brain is already tuned to want to control that chaos through some kind of belief, some kind of controlling system. Conspiracy can seep in.
Humans have a couple of things that work against us or actually work in the favor of conspiracy. One of those things is that if I had a bucket of items and I dump it out on the floor in front of an individual, they will immediately try to make connections as to how they're all related. What's the relationship between these things, even if they're totally unrelated? And then the second thing is we have a negative bias. So you're in the woods and you hear a sound, it is much more adaptive from a survival standpoint for you to assume there is a dangerous force out there in the darkness that is a threat to you, and you're going to investigate that. That's incredibly adaptive. If you are in the woods and there is a noise, assuming the worst probably helps you survive.
From a evolutionary biology perspective, which I know Allison doesn't
Allison
love,
would be so angry about.
but from the perspective of why would that be a trait that a lot of us have? Well, and I say this to my patients all the time, anxieties, we are a creature that has anxiety because we are bred to have anxiety. The caveman who hears a saber-toothed tiger that hides in a cave doesn't get eaten by the saber-toothed tiger. The one who hears the saber-toothed tiger and goes outside and goes, "What is that?" gets eaten. The one who's afraid of it has kids, and we are those kids.
Absolutely.
Of course we are.
Yeah, the assumption of danger is much more adaptive from a survival standpoint.
Which lets you have us. Like, that's where we come from.
We are anxious creatures, and anxiety is a funny thing. And for our tens of listeners who have experienced anxiety, which is probably all of our tens of listeners, if you're anxious, you find a source for the anxiety. You find a cause. You find a narrative that explains your anxiety. Even if that narrative is wrong, you still find it. So between between our need to make sense of the chaos and our predilection toward seeing danger. Here we have conspiracy theory. This is why conspiracy theory exists. This is why conspiracies exist. And right now, we also have the media to spread it out. And the problem is that when paranoia shifts from fringe to mainstream, democracy itself becomes unstable.
Once conspiracy theory takes hold and becomes your norm, there's not a lot of easy way out. I guess that's the real downer thing, is that it's a difficult virus. Once you've been infected with conspiracy theory and you see things that just aren't real and aren't there, other people really aren't going to get you out of it. It's really up to yourself. And it's rare that people get themselves out of it.
It is, and the problem is that the farther you go into the conspiracy, the more you give up your agency. And that's, I think, the relevant point for us at this moment for our democracy and our country, is that if you give in to the conspiracy theory, if you go down that road, it makes you feel better because it provides explanation to the chaos. It gives a simple explanation, but by virtue of it being a conspiracy, the dark, unknown enemy is omnipotent. They're all powerful. They have the ability to control that far exceeds anything that we personally can actually intervene in. That really your focus ends up becoming elucidating the conspiracy, not necessarily affecting it, not necessarily intervening in it, that you have no power over that, but what you have power over is connecting the dots. And that's what people end up investing in, is connecting these dots. But they don't feel like they have power to change it. It's just this perfect enemy who has time and resources and intelligence to affect your life, that they get so focused on elucidating the enemy, they end up not really exerting any effect on the now. The right now, what can you do to make a difference? Well, I can get on the internet and I can Google and I can connect dots. And that does nothing. It does nothing for the overall picture.
Yeah. So I think that brings us to prescriptions.
It does. I have a couple, but what do you have?
I do have a real prescription. Now, this is going to be for somebody who is trying to avoid going down the rabbit hole. A little uncertainty first aid. There are 3 steps. When a scary or confusing event happens, a pandemic, election outcome that you fear, etc., do a quick self-triage. 1. Pause and breathe. Acknowledge it's normal to feel anxious when things seem chaotic. 2, check your sources. Be accepting of a dramatic explanation. Look for confirmation from multiple reputable outlets. Practice lateral reading. Open a new tab and see if others are reporting the same. 3, talk it out in person. Discuss with a friend or family member that you trust. Offline. In person, please talk to somebody face to face, which can ground you and provide emotional support that a wild internet theory may falsely offer. So slow down, verify, seek support rather than instantly sharing or believing extreme claims. That's 1.
Okay. So I have one. There's something called the Occam's razor. And Occam's razor is a problem-solving principle that states that when you're faced with competing explanations, the simplest explanation is usually the best explanation. So when you're faced with these complexities, the simple solution that is sometimes difficult to sit with is that we're all people and people are imperfect and we make errors and we have our own self-interests. The complex solution is that there's a cabal of perfect individuals who are all-knowing and all-powerful, manipulating the world. When you compare those two, the simple explanation is probably correct. That's one that I want folks to think about. Occam's razor comes into play, and simple solutions as compared to your life. When you're faced with the struggles that you have in your life, it's virtually always the simple solution that actually is most relevant. The second prescription that I have is watch the X-Files. Everyone needs to watch the reruns of the X-Files and appreciate just how ridiculous it is. It's entertainment, but it
Yep.
is ridiculous in the way that they built their conspiracies.
So I do have another one, and this one it's not ridiculous, but I think one of the challenges when somebody does fall victim, and I do mean victim to conspiracy theories, your life can be dramatically changed. The people around you lose trust, will start to just completely consider you to be crazy. And you're not crazy. You're trying to resolve anxiety. We've noted that this political environment can make people especially vulnerable to conspiracy theories. For those who fall victim to this, my prescription that I think hasn't been done on a societal level, which would be a path for people who are coming out of this to be welcomed back into their communities, into their society. It really does feel like a virus for people. It's really difficult for them to leave this behind because they've destroyed so much of their life with these conspiracies that people don't want to associate with them. They don't want to talk to them. They don't want to be around them. In order for them to not be part of this conspiracy, the belongingness that they found with it, they're not finding it on the other side. For the rest of society to have something, support group, something like AA, that people who are coming out of conspiracy to be reintegrated back into society, because we're treating people who are just trying to calm their own anxieties like they are alien, but they're not going to come back. They're sticking with that community and we're not welcoming back to ours. And we want them back, but we're not welcoming them back.
Yeah, you're striking out something that I think if, anyone's paying attention, the through line is most of our prescriptions say, hey, act locally, engage with your local environment, engage with the people around you. One of the fears that I have is because social media has given us this myth, this illusion that we are engaged in a community on social media, that you can log in and you can be part of that whatever fringe community and feel part of the community, but you're not. As a human, what we need is face-to-face human interaction. And there's the illusion of it, and it fools us. Our brains are not smart. Our brains are pretty primitive. And David said previously, we haven't evolved much beyond where we started. It's just that the society, the environment, the tools we have available have evolved significantly. That getting engaged locally, being involved in where are the potholes, who's stealing whose garbage, whatever, that is a way to actually escape this bigger thing that conspiracies end up being. The conspiracies are global and universal, whereas if you get involved locally, that's where your energies actually can make a difference. It can make a difference. That's what I would love for people to do.
When people are so caught up online, like you said, nothing can touch you. You can only touch yourself.
Well, and I'm highly encouraging everyone to touch themselves. Just do it.
All right. Well, for those of you who stuck around, we want to say thank you. Smash that subscribe button. Like us on the social media platforms that you kids are interested in these days. We've got our goofy little videos that hopefully you're enjoying. Maybe we'll have more of them. Sign up for our newsletter. Send us some questions on random, whatever, anonymous questions or comments or whatever.
Anything.
I don't care. Whatever you want. We'll read it and we'll decide if it's worthy of whatever. For any bourbon distilleries that would like to send us bourbon, we're still trying to get some. We're still paying for bourbon. How is this possible? We've been working so hard to not have to pay for bourbon. Robbie, you come up with a scheme to get free booze.
Yeah. It didn't work out quite like I thought.
I don't know how many thousands of dollars you have to spend on equipment and how much time you have to spend to get free bourbon. One day we're going to get free bourbon and it will have been totally worth it.
Yeah.
We may have to open up our own distillery.
That's our next business adventure is Drink the Nation bourbon, folks.
I think that's...
You can buy it at the same places that you can buy your Testo Rage Max.
Testo Rage Max and Shrink the Nation bourbon.
XX. Yeah.
It'll be,
they'll be together.
It'll be cooked on the dumpster fire.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that does it. I think we've covered this topic. Let's see if Allison has any complaints. And we'll go from there. So
I don't know if it's much. Will Allison have complaints? We'll see the complaints that Allison has.
Yeah, we'll get the hate texts later after we post this, and then we'll decide if it's worthy of maybe an episode. So, all right.
You know, if the patriarchy decides that it's worthy.
Well, we have a meeting. We need to get a goat. So cue up the music, and we'll be off, and we're out.